Good morning. So what I've learned today is that we have, right now we're at 24 attendees. And as you're joining us, I'd like for you to be mindful that we do not, this is a new system that we're working with, so we're getting adjusted, and we're working through that. So we do have the question area that's signed up here that you can pose a question with to me as we go through our training today. So be mindful of that. And then there's a handout session where there is a handout that we will refer to during our training session. Now, I mentioned that if you are calling in by telephone, you may not be able to talk to me directly, so you may be able to type in your responses because I don't think I have the ability to unmute the phone. I'm looking at that now, so you may have to type if you want to chime in on something. Now, also, there's an area where you can raise your hand to ask questions, so we're going to work through this together. Hopefully, we'll have several trainings that will come in that, we'll get more familiar with this training forum. So bear with me today. Now I see we have others who are joining us. Now I'm not picking on anybody, but I do know that Victoria is on the call here. And Victoria, can you respond? Can you talk at this point so we can see if I can actually hear just a little troubleshooting?
Yes, I can. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you, Victoria. So
You're welcome.
what about Miss Reyes? Toma Reyes.
I'm unmuted. Okay.
So great. So let's be mindful that as we go through the training, if you are not talking or asking a question, please place your things on mute, and that will help us with a lot of the backdrop. We're anticipating about 44 people registered. We're at the number of 30. I'm very much aware of how precious our time is, so I want to get started. So I see some familiar names, and as you all may know, I'm new to the CASA position here as the Director of Program Operations. I've had an opportunity to come and visit a lot of the programs there, so I'm looking forward to working with everyone as it relates to technical support and training. I'm available to supervisors, directors. Feel free to contact me at any time. If you are on the webinar and you have not muted your device, will you please do so?
Yeah, that's right.
So let's get started. I think I'm going to have to mute everyone. If we can't, stay on mute until we get, until you have an opportunity to speak, or if you have a question, and I welcome your questions. So I want to get started. Today's presentation is about working your CASA case, and that's for advocates and supervisors. This is all about interaction within our program. Interaction is very important on the CASA cases because this is what helps us reach our goals. The goals that are set out by National CASA, the goals that you have in your local programs. It helps us work family case plans that are set out by the Department of Children and Family Services. And so basically, CASA supervisors, we want to look at it as a sport. We're coaches. And we're going to coach advocates who are a part of the team. They're the team through this process of advocacy with the goal of children reaching permanency. And not only do we want our children to reach permanency, we want them to have the type of permanency where they're thriving. That means even after they leave foster care, we've worked so diligently with our children that they're in a position to thrive well off into adulthood. So we're going to start our presentation here because it's after 10. I know how important your time is. So working your CASA case is an ongoing process, ongoing interaction between the assigned advocate supervisor and the volunteer advocate. This ongoing interaction revolves around providing direct services to children that gear towards the goal of permanency. Supervisors should guide advocates through the process of children reaching permanency in a reasonable time frame. So what does that mean? We know that the SNP process is at least 24 months. That's the goal of permanency, whether it's reunification, adoption, or if the child can go into a legal guardianship. But as a CASA, we want to look at avenues for placing children in safe homes long before 24 months occur. And so that's where this advocacy process goes into place with the supervisor and the advocate actually interacting, attending meetings, looking at the family service case plan, seeing which goals have been met on that family service case plan. So as we go through this training, we'll look more into how does this happen? How do we go about doing that? Direct services to children include monthly in-person contact. That's our visits that advocates go out and they visit with their children. Interviews with involved parties to determine the facts. That means that we're talking to other involved parties that are in this case. It may be the foster parent. It may be a school teacher. It may be a mental health provider. The list is long. And as an advocate, we should be making contact, talking to these people about the progress that's being made on the family case plan as it relates to our children. If there are any concerns with the case, like what is going on with our case, because at the end of all of this direct services that we're providing for families, this is going to compose our court report. This is going to help us to find what are our recommendations for this case. So it's very important that supervisors actually work with advocates through this process of providing direct services to children, fitting staffing cases, and developing recommendations that are going to be beneficial to children in the long run as it relates to permanency and thriving. We want positive outcomes where children are thriving. Can anyone think of any other examples of advocates providing direct services? Well, some other examples may be in providing direct services to children is that we would visit a school and we would develop a rapport with that school. We would develop a rapport with the counselor. If possible, we'll develop rapports with teachers. And we want to develop the type of rapports with those schools where the school is actually contacting the CASA advocate to talk about the progress that the children or child is making. And that progress can be either negative or positive progress. If it's something that's of a concern, if the school brings it to our attention, we can work to recommend that this child receive tutoring, that they need school supplies and things of that nature. So that's another example of direct services. I'm going to pause for a minute because I'm curious to know if everyone can hear me and if you all are interested in responding to some of the prompts that you may have. For example, what are some other examples of advocates providing direct services? So let's see here.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I just want to make sure that you guys can hear me. Bunny, do you have any other examples? And I'm not picking on you, Bunny. Your name just popped up. Do you have any other examples of how an advocate can provide direct services to a child?
Actually, I do not at this time as I have never had my own child yet. I'm very new.
Oh, great. Well,
So
welcome.
I'm learning from the rest of you guys.
Okay, so what parish are you in, Bunny?
I'm in New Orleans Parish.
You're in New Orleans Parish. Okay, so let me see who else is online, and welcome. We look forward to working with you. Christopher Simmons,
Yes. Yeah.
can you think of any other examples where a child would be receiving direct services from an advocate?
I would say that, possibly during, visitations, if that advocate can be with that child and to be able to interact with that child on a one-on-one basis to try to find out a little bit more what that child may need, I think is a possible help.
Okay, so that's a good example is, are you, the visits, so are you referring to the monthly visits that are conducted one-on-one?
Yes, monthly visits.
Great. So that is that is one of the ultimate primary direct services that we should be providing for children. Our advocates should be visiting with children in their placements. These visits should be occurring one-on-one, that's away from the foster parent, so that you can establish a bond with that child so that that child feels comfortable in talking to you about things that may be bothering them or that things that are a concern. So that's a wonderful example. So, Michelle, how are you, Michelle? Michelle? Thank you for your response, Chris.
Oh, no problem.
Michelle, I see you have your hand raised. Okay. Miss Peggy? What's going on with this? So we're going to put forward. Now, Merriam-Webster defines, and I'm getting familiar with this screen, so give me a moment. Interaction is the act of talking or doing things with other people, or a mutual or reciprocal action or influence. Macmillan defines interaction as the activity of being with and talking to other people and the way people react to each other. The process by which different things affect each other, the effect they have on each other. If we look, both of those definitions look at interaction as an action, something that's done with other people. And an interaction in working a CASA case, it should be mutual. It should not be a one-sided thing. Advocates need answers to questions, and they need them in the most timely way. Because keep in mind, we're servicing children, and advocates are volunteering their time to work with these families. We're all passionate about doing that. So this should be mutual. It should be like texting, going back and forth. It should also be action orientated. So when you're interacting with your advocate or supervisor or vice versa, if the supervisor is the coach, the supervisor is coaching this advocate through the advocacy process. So basically there's some action going to happen. So we're going to have more examples about that. So it's an action process, and it should influence. The advocate and the supervisor should influence one another, and it should have some type of effect or change. And that effect or change is going to be moving our children out of foster care or other placements into permanent placements where they're able to thrive. And more importantly, that interaction, again, must be reciprocal. It must be the same. It must be going backwards and forwards. What are the benefits of supervisor-volunteer interaction? Well, I've been talking about children receiving permanency where they have opportunities to thrive long term. That's well off into adulthood. These are the type of services that we want to provide to our children that, though they may experience time in foster care, because of their CASA, they are able to thrive. They have found permanent placements. They're thriving educational-wise. They're thriving in their mental health. They're receiving the services they need. Once they leave foster care, if necessary, those services are still put in place, because what we would like to see happen is we would like to see healthy adults. And so in order to have healthy adults, we have to work on the children now. And that's a very important role that the CASA advocate has in developing rapport with children and being available to them. A sense of someone is here for me regardless of whatever is going on. Also, children receive support and develop lasting relationships. There are CASAs who are involved with their foster children, their CASA kids well off into adulthood, that these relationships are necessary, because when you think about some of the children who are in foster care, who grow up and they age out of foster care, they may not ever develop a sense of family or have family. And so CASA advocates become their family. They become people that they can call and ask for advice in adulthood, or share, great milestones in their life. So that's one of the benefits of supervisor volunteer action, because through the coaching and advocacy process, we build and develop lasting relationships. Not only do we want to go through the process of advocacy, but we want this advocacy to be effective. And that is that it is child-focused to make better child best interest decisions. And those child best interest decisions are those decisions that impact this child way down the line. So those are the kind of things that we're going to make sure that we are doing, that our advocacy is effective. And it's beneficial that supervisors and volunteers work together to make sure that we're effective in our advocacy. And for volunteer advocates, this is very rewarding, that we sign up, we volunteer our time to do something, and we have a supervisor that we can interact with and engage with and grow together and learn through the process. And as advocates become more seasoned, and we have advocates who are just starting, we have advocates who advocated for 10, 15 years. So a seasoned advocate may not need as much coaching as a new advocate would, but they still need encouragement. They need support. They need to be made aware of new findings that are on the horizon as it relates to evidence-based studies, because we know things change. And things also change within our CASA program. So seasoned advocates also need interaction with their supervisors, because they need the support to continue with their advocacy, because we all know that this work can be very challenging. Also, supervisor volunteer interaction meets the goals and objectives of the CASA program. National CASA program says that these are standards that we must meet. And also the local CASA program standard says that supervision of advocates is a part of the local CASA program goals. So we're going to move on from that. If there are any questions, please raise your hand. Let me scroll through. If you have any questions about anything we just talked about, I'm going to see if anyone's hand is raised. Now, I did get an email from Anitra. So Anitra, that handout will be sent. The handout will be made available to you after the training. So no worries. I'm going to make sure that everyone gets a copy of the PowerPoint and the handout for your future use.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. So, and as we work through, if there's, I don't know, can you guys see where you can raise your hand? And I don't want you guys to be shy. I want everyone to be really involved and engaged in our training, because this is our time together, and this is about you all. Not about me. This is about you all receiving training so that we can have strong CASA programs. So I don't see anyone with a raised hand. So we're going to move on. What are the different modes of interaction between the advocate and the supervisor? Well, we have our face-to-face or in-person interaction. And that's where we physically meet. And we discuss the case. We attend court and we're still talking about the case. We're observing behavior of the parent and the children in court. So that face-to-face or in-person interaction with the CASA supervisor and advocate. And I want to talk about Optima as we go through our training. Because when you are entering your information into Optima, you're going to have a tab there that says, is this face-to-face or in-person? And you're going to click on that, and that is the advocate and the supervisor, because we should be making contact with our advocates at least once a month, and advocates, we should be making contact with our supervisors at least once a month. This is a part of what we should be doing as the CASA program, because it's very important that we maintain contact if we're going to reach that goal of permanency with our children. So also, another mode is telephone contact. And if you look on Optima, there's going to be a tab for you to click on telephone contact. In addition, there are other types or modes of interaction, and it's written, and it includes emails, text messaging, and written correspondence, the old letter, the one you can hold in your hand that you can mail to someone. And so you also have an area in Optima where you can enter emails, text messages, or any other written correspondence.
I wasn't involved at the time.
Is there a question?
I was just wondering, I'm sorry, this is Murray. I was just wondering about the Optima program because I missed the training. So will they have another one?
Okay, that's something you would have to direct with your local program.
Okay.
And so for today, I'm just wanting everyone to have where Optima training would, how the modes of interaction would go into the Optima system. And so you can ask your supervisor about that, or you can ask one of the program directors, or when the next Optima training is going to be at your local program. So
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome. So on the emails and written correspondence, as that interaction goes on, now there are some concerns about Optima and emails and text messages and written correspondence. I think the easiest thing to do with that is to print out that email or email that text to an email account and print it out, or that written correspondence that you have, is that you would load that information up onto the document area in the CASA portion, supervisors, and that you would load this up, and that you would create an entry, a contact log, that you spoke with this advocate on such and such a date, or you corresponded with them via email, or there was a handwritten letter. You have to document this, and you give us just a brief summary of what was discussed, and you label that document, whatever it is, email from advocate on such and such a date, and you direct whoever's reading this contact log to the document area with the title and the date of when you uploaded that document, so that anyone who is following this case, they can pull up the actual correspondence between the advocate and the supervisor and see what happened on that case. So,
I don't know.
ma'am, that was a good question. What were you saying? Okay, so the next thing I'm going to move to is electronic live videos. And that is our Skype. We have Tango. We have FaceTime. We have all of those things where we can actually sit and be in live time and interact with our advocate. And so if we're going to do some interaction, the live video, then we would need to transcribe that and just say we FaceTime or whatever and enter those entries into Optima. Now, advocates, let me remind you of something. If you meet face-to-face with your supervisor, if you talk on the telephone with your supervisor, if there's some email correspondence with your supervisor, or if you do a live FaceTime with your supervisor, You have to know that in the Optima system. If a supervisor knows something in the Optima system, the advocate must also know something in the Optima system. Remember when we talked about this communication is reciprocal? So an advocate entering data saying they talk to you is not enough for a supervisor. Supervisor, you gotta case log it, and vice versa. Advocate, a supervisor entering that information, you have to do it also. That these contacts were made on such and such a date, and so the advocate is going to be talking about what they've done working on the case, and the supervisor is going to be talking about the coaching process, about what they have asked or suggested that the advocate do as they work towards permanency. Any questions about that portion? Okay, we're going to move on to the next slide. Now let's go back. Okay, this is where I need you to refer to your handouts. Now, are you able to pull up your handouts?
Yes.
Does everyone have their handout?
I do not.
Who am I?
I do not.
And is this a phone call? That does not.
I do not.
Bonnie is on the computer.
Okay, so if you're looking at your screen, there's going to be a portion that says handout. Can you click on that?
I have it.
Oh.
I have it.
I don't know. It sounds like someone is shredding some paper. Can you put your phone on mute? Or your webcam? Okay, on the handout, what I'll do, I hope everyone has access to it. If not, we're going to get started, and you'll hear the context of the first handout. And so you'll get the gist of what's going on, and the handout will be emailed to you after today's training for your use, and you can review it. Tommy, will you be kind enough to read that first handout for me? And it's what does supervisor volunteer interaction look like? Handout 1.
That's one.
I do. I'm in those, and I'm like, well, maybe, and I just came from the road. But I love New Orleans, atmosphere, like, the courtyard, the pool, and just, I mean,
Tommy, are you there? Okay.
I hear it.
Okay, I'll read this handout for us. What does supervisor volunteer interaction look like? Supervisor volunteer interaction is child case focused. And here's an example. If you have not muted your phone, please do so.
Someone's going to be calling back for me, Janae. Just let me know.
Or your webcam or your laptop. If you're not on mute, please go to mute unless you have a question. Okay, so on the example, it's in a previous court hearing, CASA learned that the mother ignores her child during court-ordered visitation. The CASA supervisor and advocate met to discuss how the mother's behavior of ignoring her child during visits impacts the permanency goal of reunification. After some discussion, it was decided that the volunteer advocate will observe the mother's behavior and interaction in at least 3 visits before the next scheduled court hearing. The volunteer will also speak with the child in detail about how visits are going with the mother. For example, the advocate will ask the child what is her favorite thing about visiting with the mother. She may also ask, does your mother bring snacks for the 2 of you to share during visits? The volunteer will also ask the DCFS case manager and foster parent for feedback on visits that CASA does not observe. The advocate will note all findings in Optima. Okay. And I think I mentioned again, I'm going to mention again that I do not have the ability for some reason to unmute everyone at the same time. But this first scenario is actually the CASA advocate and the CASA supervisor attended court, and some information was brought to their attention about how the mother engages with the child during visitation. That's court-ordered visitation. So we're going to move to the question portion of that. And you can either respond and you type in your answer, or you can give your answer verbally, because I'm unmuting people to talk and to participate in this. What mode of interaction was used between the advocate and the supervisor here? Anyone? For the handout one. Mary Fraser, did you have access to the handout? Well, this was face-to-face interaction. There was face-to-face interaction at court, and there was also face-to-face or in-person interaction when they met. The next question is, how does visitation impact the reunification process? As CASA advocates, we should be observing visits between the child, and the parents, or that caregiver that the child is going to be reunited with. And in our observations, we're not engaging with the family. The visitation time is for that parent or caregiver to maintain a bond with their child and to have visitation that is set out by the law, that they have a right to visit with the child, unless there are circumstances where it would not be beneficial or in the child's best interest for them to visit. So that visitation process is important in a reunification process, because it allows others to see, how does this child respond to the parent? Are they engaging with the parent? Do they bring them things? Do they make eye contact? Is the child standoffish? Is the child afraid? So visitation is a very important part of the reunification process, because if the goal is for the family to reunite, we want to see a bond established. Is the parent meeting the needs of that child even though they are separated? So the next one is, what developed during the meeting between the supervisor and the advocate? Well, because of this in-person, face-to-face contact, interaction, a plan was developed. The supervisor and the advocate developed a plan. And the plan that was developed was for the advocate to observe at least 3 scheduled visitations before the next court hearing, and that's to observe that behavior between the child and the mother. They also talked about speaking to the child. How does the child feel about the visits? We have to be very careful when we speak to children about their visitation and different things in their foster home. So one of the things we would ask that child is, do you enjoy visiting with mom at the state office building on Tuesdays? And they will tell you yes or no or whatever it might be. Well, what's your favorite thing about it? So things like that. Or did mom bring snacks for you all to share? And if they say yes, you guys can talk about, well, what kind of snacks? Well, she brought cookies, but I don't like Oreo cookies. And so we learn about the likes and the dislikes of the child. If a parent is bringing snacks and they bring Oreo cookies and the child doesn't like Oreo cookies, we might want to say, you know, mom, such and such likes chocolate chip cookies. But somebody may have given those cookies or snacks to mom, and mom felt, okay, this is something I'm bringing. So we have to always look at, all sides because mom showed up and she brought something, even if the child didn't like it. So when we talk to the children about how visitation is going, and we also want to know, what is DCFS perspective about the visits? What have they observed? What has the foster parent observed during the visit? Because they bring a different perspective about what's going on within the visit. So we're going to go to the next handouts. And this is the second handout that I'm going to read to you. It's going to be contact with a volunteer advocate, and it's called supervision. When you look in the Optima database where you're going to enter data, you're going to see contact with volunteer advocate. One is going to say supervision. And so the interaction that is case related and child focused is going to be the one that says supervision. And that's what we should enter those case logs that are revolving around the case, that is child focused, and that it is working towards the goal of permanency for children. So here's what the supervisor has indicated in a contact log. DCFS contacted the CASA office by letter to notify the program and the advocate that there has been a change in the child's placement. A copy of the letter can be found in Optima under documents titled Placement Change for Child 7/20/2016. The letter did not indicate why the placement change was made. This email notification is to make you aware of the placement change and that the information has already been updated in Optima. As the assigned advocate, you will need to visit the child as soon as possible in the new placement. Please use the updated contact information and call the foster parent to schedule a time to visit with the child. Please observe the child and the home and note your findings in Optima. Ask if the child had to change schools. If so, collect this information from the foster parent. Also, contact the DCFS worker by email or phone to determine why the change in placement occurred. Please note your findings in Optima. Should you identify any concerns during your observations of the child and the placement or in your contact with DCFS, please notify the CASA supervisor as soon as possible. Now, what the CASA supervisor has done is notify the advocate of a change in the child's placement. They have also not only notified the advocate, they've made the placement update changes in Optima. They provided a guide for the advocate to go through to see that this child is safe in this new placement and what this placement is about. To schedule time to go visit and told them, observe the home, observe the child. They also asked that the advocate contact the DCFS worker to see why was this placement change made. So this is coaching that advocate through the process. An email was sent to alert the advocate, and it was all of what happened was added into the contact logs in the Optima system so that it is documented. So handout 3 is going to talk about contact with the CASA supervisor. So this is going to be from the advocate's perspective. So I will read this to you. The advocate has noted in Optima, according to reports from the DCFS worker, the child's placement was changed because of concerns the mother had about visitation. The mother told DCFS that initially the visits were going well. Then the foster parent started to tell the child that the mother did not love her. The foster parent told the child to not talk to the mother during visits, and afterwards they would go to the park. The mother said this is why she attended the visits, but was hurt because her child had no interest in seeing her. She told DCFS that this is when she decided to start texting during the visits because it helped her not to cry. DCFS said the child did not change schools. During the observation of the home, I learned that the child has her own room in the home. There are no other foster children in the home. The home is a 3-bedroom wood frame home in a residential neighborhood. The utilities were optimal to include running water. The cabinets, pantries, and refrigerator were stocked with food. There was plenty of space in the backyard for play, and a swing set that the child felt comfortable swinging on while we talked. The child told CASA she thought her mother did not love her, and she was told that she would be adopted by the other foster parent. The child said she did not tell anyone because she enjoyed the trips to the park after visiting with her mother. The foster parent told CASA it will take some time for the child to adjust to the new placement because she is new to foster care. She told CASA the child is sleeping and eating all of her food. The foster parent also said the child was told of the school was told of the change, and they plan to notify her if they notice changes in the child's behavior. After the visit, CASA contacted the mother. The mother told CASA that she is glad that DCFS addressed her concerns about the visits. She said her visit should improve because the placement has changed. The mother also told CASA that she has almost completed her parenting and anger management classes. She said she hopes that the judge will reunite her with her daughter at the next hearing. So this is Supervisor CASA interaction. And because the supervisor notified the advocate of the placement change, which led the advocate to go out and visit with the mother, and visit the new home, observe the home, contact the DCFS worker. So now the advocate has a response. And based upon this response that the advocate has, there are some other things that need to be done. And my intentions were that we would, I just changed the screen, we would do the to-do list together. However, we're going to work on improving our webinars so that we can collectively participate together. So today, if you're free and you want to say, just chime in on what our to-do list would look like, then you can. If not, I will walk us through the to-do list. I think that would probably be more beneficial for our time. So if you're not using the to-do list in your Optima system, some programs are, some programs are not. So if you are familiar with the to-do list in the Optima system. If you are not, then I will explain to you what the advocates found out can be compiled into a to-do list. So as a supervisor, or advocate supervisor, you're going to read this advocate response. And you've read the advocate response, and she's talked to DCFS, and DCFS has told her the placement change occurred because of the former foster parent telling the child, coaching the child, saying that the mother doesn't love, with the goal of her adopting this child. So we know that. Is there anything else we need to do on the to-do list as it relates to the placement change and the foster parent? No, we've moved on to another foster parent. We do need to add into our to-do list under education that the CASA advocate needs to contact the school. And they need to let the school know that they are still the CASA advocate assigned to this case for this particular child. And that if anything should occur with this particular child behavior because of the placement change, so please notify them also. Because it's just not good enough for a CASA to take a word of any involved party in a case. We have to verify, and we have to always know what's going on with our children. So under that educational component, the supervisor is going to add education, ask for the child's most recent attendance record to make sure that the child has still been attending school even though there was a placement change. They may ask about, has there been any discipline concerns? So under your category for education as it relates to this child in the to-do list, that's one thing that would need to be done based upon the feedback that the advocate gave the supervisor. We're going to move on to the next thing about the observation of the home. The child has their own room there in the home, so everything looks fine in the home and the placement. The foster parent has food, the utilities are working, there's running water, there's a big backyard for the child to play in. So everything looks okay in the placement portion of it. Right here, the child said she did not tell anyone about what the foster parent said about her being adopted because she enjoyed the visits to the park afterwards. Now, one could say, oh, well, this is an ordinary child. This is just what children do, so on and so forth. Or was there a fear component, or is there something going on between the visits and the mother? Does she want to be with her mother? So if the child is receiving counseling, we're going to go under that tab for mental health well-being. This is something that you may, as a CASA, want to notify the counselor about, where you are aware of this situation was going on, so that the mental health counselor can make that, can talk to the child about this, and just to see that there's nothing else wrong that could be going on between the child and the mother, or what impact did the foster parent have on the child, telling the child not to engage with their mother. So there would be a mental health thing. If the child is not receiving any services, we may want to recommend that the child have an opportunity to talk to someone about what happened in her previous placement. So there should be something under your to-do list for mental health. So we're going to move on to the next portion of it. We talked about contacting the school. And then we're also going to look at the mother. Now, that to-do list, most of that coincides with the child and child well-being and children being safe in their placements. And so, but with the mother, we need to do some additional following up. Mom told us that she has almost completed her parenting and anger management classes. So we need to contact the provider of those services to determine, is mom almost finished with her parenting and anger management? If so, when will she be finished? Is she participating in the parenting and anger management? And just because a person completes a parenting or anger management course, it doesn't mean that they can implement these changes into their lives. So we don't know if the child will be returned to the mom. The CASA court report from this said we should see that mom is able to implement, that she exhibits the skills that she's learned in her parenting class, and that she's able to control her anger. So that's how the to-do list should be going. And the to-do list, when the advocate pulls up their Optima, they will see that they have some to-dos in their to-do list from the advocate supervisor. And from that point on, they will start to work on those things, and they can check off. And when the supervisor opens their screen and clicks on that case, they'll see what progress has been made. And if the advocate is having an issue with doing some of the things on the to-do list, then the supervisor will be aware of that, and they can again go in and coach the advocate through what they need to do to remedy that matter, so that we can continue to reach towards the goal of permanency. So that's ongoing interaction. Now, please listen to this. The to-do list in no way is it to replace interaction between an advocate and a supervisor. This is just something that we use, like when you make your grocery list to go to the store, you make that grocery list so you won't forget to do anything. And you have planned meals at home that you need these things on the grocery list, and you have things that you want to clean at the house. So the to-do list does not replace supervisor interaction with the advocate, or advocate interaction with the supervisor, because advocates also have the ability to create a to-do list for their supervisor. So this engagement is ongoing. So that's pretty much the gist of our training today. And so we're open for any questions that anyone may have about today's training. Are we good to go? If we are, you can type yes in the question area. Ooh. Okay, I do see some questions here. Let me see. Because I want to respond to your questions here. Okay, we have quite, it is not mandatory to do a to-do list. I like to, when I was a CASA supervisor, I enjoyed doing the to-do list because it created a plan for the advocates where they could work independently and know what they would need to do. And we always talked and we interacted and engaged, and that to-do list was helpful because it reminded the advocate and me of things that were going on with the case that needed to be done. Now, when you are doing your case note logs and your to-do list, when you write a court report, your case note logs, your court report should reflect the activity in your case note logs. So a flag is that when we see court reports and they're not similar to what's in the case note logs, because working case activity basically determines how we're going to come up with recommendations for children's best interests. So they should be reflected in your court report writings. Okay, I'm going to look at another question. Attending child's parent-teacher conferences. CASA advocates are able to attend teacher-child conferences. That's a part of the educational advocacy component of being an advocate, because keep in mind, when you're an advocate, you are just looking at every aspect of that child's life and educating a portion of that. Now, there are some conferences that you may have to get special permission to attend as it relates to children, and each parish is different. So, for example, if we have a child who has an IEP, which is confidential, they may say, oh, well, we can't let you come to this. We're not going to let you go to this meeting. So your approach with that type of conference, a scheduled IEP meeting, would be to take your CASA order of appointment that assignment that the advocate has, and you would have to go to the special education department at your local school district, and you would need to present this order to them and say that you do have authority to be and participate in this meeting because the judge said so. The court order says that you are to do this on behalf of the child. And they will let you attend after that, but they have things that they have to protect as it relates to confidentiality as well as we do. So don't just give up when they say, oh, no, you can't come. You go to the next level, because education is very important for our children, because when we're removed out of our homes, we're traumatized. And so we go to school and we may have issues and so on and so forth. So we need advocates to really strongly advocate education on behalf of the children to make sure that their needs are met. I'm going to move on to another question that we have here. Now, there's a question posed about therapists and FTMs. Okay, now the question about therapists, I don't know if this was a question to me or if you were responding to a previous question that came up. Let's see. What if your caseworker is not responding to your request for communication? Okay, if your caseworker is not responding, and I hope this is an advocate question, that the DCFS worker is not responding to your or communicating with you. So your supervisor should be aware of this. So the supervisor should contact the DCFS case manager supervisor and bring that to their attention, that the advocate is trying to reach out to them, the purpose of why they're reaching out to them, so on and so forth, and to let them know that DCFS worker needs to communicate with you. Now that sounds all good when we say that, but it doesn't mean that they're going to call right away. And I would encourage advocate supervisors to send that email, to email that supervisor, that DCFS supervisor, with your concerns about not getting feedback, the advocate not getting feedback. So that's one approach that you would use. If that doesn't work, of course, you may have to get the program director involved in getting information from the caseworker. And one thing that I would like to impress upon you, advocates, DCFS workers are very, very busy. And it doesn't exclude their behavior, but they have so many things that they're doing. And so developing a good rapport with that DCFS worker is very, very important. And if you don't develop a rapport with that DCFS worker, that's the goal. But you need to make it clear that you're not going to go away, and you do need this information, and you are willing to work with those families. And so it's very, very difficult sometimes to get the information that you may need. Okay, so one time my CASA supervisor did not, I can't read this, did not, let me work with this for a minute, because I think this is a good question, but the screen is so, give me just a minute. I'm trying to read what this says. This is not a big screen at all. Be patient with me. Can you guys give me just a moment?
Lord, but it's
Okay, guys. Okay, now I'm going to try to go back to these questions and see. We got quite a few questions, and I'm so excited about the questions and that. Okay, now I think I can go back. I'm just trying to go back to the point where I was at. I finally got the screen. Okay. One time, my CASA supervisor did not believe what I found was going on in the home. What then? Okay, as an advocate, this is your case. And so in any fact finding, there's a portion of the advocate's role where you are doing investigative work. And so in investigative work, you know, we have speculations, but we are looking for facts. And even if the CASA supervisor does not believe what you found was going on in the home, you still have an obligation to report what's going on in the home if it's harmful to the child. If it's harmful to the child, you have an obligation to bring that to someone's attention. So I don't know enough about what you found in the home to comment on what your next step would be. However, if you have an issue with the CASA supervisor not believing what you found in the home, the next step for you to be would be to staff that case, that you would need to meet with that CASA supervisor, and you may need to meet with the CASA program director to staff that case, because our children are very important, and we need to know everything that's going on with the cases so we can make child's best interest decisions. So I don't know enough about case to say directly what the next step would be, but a staffing would definitely be in order where you can sit and then talk about what you found. Is it mandatory to use the to-do list? No, the to-do list is not mandatory, but it's helpful. There some programs it may be mandatory, other programs it may not be, but it is helpful, and maybe eventually they may be moving towards the to-do list being mandatory, because if you think about on the onset of your assigned case, how you have this plan that you should be creating with the advocate about how to work through the case, this may eventually replace that plan that you do on the onset and the monitoring that you do on each stage of the child being in care. Now here's another question. If I'm observing a visitation at the DCFS office behind the mirror and I see that the parent is not paying attention to the child, do I step in and try to give parent advice? The child is 3. No abuse is ever observed, but the mom gives the child her phone to play with while she puts on makeup or does her nails. I have been the sole observer for all parental visitation for the past year. DCFS only hears what I have to tell them about the visits between the mother and the child. Okay, here's my concern about this. You're the only observer, but it sounds like to me you're supervising a visit, because advocates don't supervise visits between parents and children. That's the responsibility of the Department of Children and Family Services. So we are at no point do we supervise a visit. Even behind a mirror, there should be a DCFS worker there or a foster parent there. So if you're doing this alone, you should not be doing this. Those are their responsibilities. CASA are only to observe visitation. And as we talked about early on, if there's nothing harmful going on, there's no need for you to intervene. However, visits are between the parent and the child. In no way should a CASA attend a visit and intervene with that parent while they're in their visitation time. That may be something you may want to address with that parent, when you meet with that parent, because we should continue to maintain contact with our parents. And we want to present that information in a way that the parent can receive that information. For example, we may say, you know, I've noticed on the visits that the child has your cell phone and that they kind of play with the cell phone. And you may say, you know, we live in an era where we have our cell phones all the time. But you may want to add in, you know, this is a bonding time. So do you have any planned activities or games that you and the 3-year-old may engage in? Do you have a doll you could play with her with? You ever thought about bringing up snacks or have a tea time or something like that? And you remind that parent that you're observing this visit because you want to see how she engages with the child so you can report that back to the courts, that this is a part of the process. So sometimes parents don't understand what they should be doing. They only know they should go to a visit. They don't know they should engage. We have to keep in mind that children are in care for a reason. So these are things that parents should be learning. Hopefully that answers your question. And if the goal is reunification, surely as an advocate, you want that parent to be equipped to parent that child. So let's see what the next question holds. I knew there was a to-do list tab, but never looked at it. Are there any other tips you can use, give on using Optima more efficiently? Well, it looks like we may do something different. I mean, we may do something on Optima that sounds like a request that some people are having. So we may look at doing something on Optima. Optima is basically a case management system. And so that's how we're going to manage all of our data. And what I like about Optima is that you can do so much with Optima. You can upload your court reports. You can upload your court orders. Any document you may receive, you can upload that document and create a title for it, and you can include that in your case notes. You can even upload pictures into Optima. If you have a picture that you've taken, for example, you have a home and you are gone into the parent's home and you find it's not suitable for the child to go into, you can take pictures of that, you know, area that you found that it would not be safe for the child. You can include those pictures in your court report, and you can also upload those pictures up into the Optima system. So there are a lot of things that we can do with Optima to use it more efficiently and effectively. So for example, if someone is reading your court report, they can easily go look at the pictures that you said, this court report has pictures titled such and such under this date. They can easily look at the pictures and see the home and what your concerns were. So we'll have to look at doing something on Optima in a later date. More importantly, I wanted you all to make the interaction between supervisor advocate interaction and the Optima system and what it looks like in there. But I want you guys to continue to interact and also include Optima. I have it. Okay. I can hear you, but I have major feedback. We're going to have to remember, if we're not talking, we need to mute our phone calls. We need to mute whatever we're using. I'm able to type. Someone typed in about FTM. I don't know what your, oh, somebody gave a response, I guess, into what would be another direct service, and I guess that would be attending an FTM. Thank you, CASA. with Tommy and his team out there. I appreciate you all still watching. Here's another question, attending child teacher conferences. You are able to do that. So the other question was, the last thing someone responded to the first question and said they found abuse. Well, what type of abuse did they find in the foster home? And was it reported? Because as an advocate, you are a mandated reporter. It's not up to you to determine if that's a valid finding of abuse, but you do have an obligation to report any suspected abuse that you may find. So if you ever enter a foster home or a parent's home on your assigned case and you speculate that there's some kind of abuse that's going on, you have an obligation to report it to the Child Protection Hotline, and the state is obligated to determine whether or not if an investigation is needed. So if you find abuse, you definitely need to report it, and you need to discuss that with your CASA supervisor, but a report needs to be made, because we don't determine that children are safe. That's for the Department of Children and Family Services to decide upon after the conclusion of their investigation. And sometimes, even after investigation, they may not find a valid finding of abuse, but if you continue to see these indicators that there's some type of abuse going on, don't ignore that. I mean, I would rather do my part to ensure that children are safe rather than, you know, ignore it or look the other way. Or, you know, as an advocate and even as a CASA supervisor, we experience a lot of ridicule because people say we're nosy, we're just in people's business, we shouldn't be doing this, that, and the other. And I think as citizens, we all have an obligation to children. So I can't answer your question totally, but if you found abuse, you are a mandated reporter and you're obligated to report that. So I think that's pretty much about it as it relates to answering any questions. And I'm going to continue to work, I'm going to continue to work on improving our webinar so that we can better share and better engage with each other on these webinars. You will receive a copy of the handout via email. You are also asked to participate in the evaluation of the trainer, which is me, Carla Burgos. And you will also be able to find this webinar in the near future, hopefully by next week, loaded up into Indigo. So you can view that and share that with others. So let me see. I think I have another question. I think that's about it on the questions. So it's okay for you guys to sign off now. And again, I'm Carla Burgos. If you should need me, feel free to contact me. My email address is carla@louisianachildren.org. Thanks and have a great day. If everybody is logging on, people you can see. I'm gonna